So what is the National Construction Code, first of all?
So the National Construction Code is the rules that we have around making sure that buildings are safe and that they have the right amenities, that they have things like fire protection in them, that they're structurally sound. And so it's a set of rules that deal with our plumbing and our standards for how we build buildings. It's a national document, and then each state and territory calls up those technical standards in their state legislation, which means that when builders build buildings, they must comply with these technical obligations that tell us how we build homes and other buildings.
And how often are changes made to the code, Bronwyn? Are regular reviews carried out?
So the code was introduced in the mid-90s, and up until about 8 years ago, the code was changed every year with updates, technical updates to it and changes. There was then a decision that that was too frequent, and so now the cycle is every 3 years. But the ministers can come together and decide to have urgent changes, which happened, for example, after our cladding issues. But otherwise, it's a 3-year cycle.
And what are the most recent changes to be proposed where there was a question over freezing those changes?
So some of the changes which are waiting to be approved at the moment are in relation to how we do waterproofing in buildings. Waterproofing defects are the highest rate of defects, or the highest kind of defects that we have in buildings. They lead to structural problems as well as mould and other issues, very expensive issues to rectify. And it's been recognised over the last few years that this defect is significant, and so work has been done on reviewing and updating and filling gaps to do with these waterproofing requirements. So this is an example of why it's important that the code is changed regularly as we have a living and breathing document where we can feed back issues that are occurring in building quality back into the code so that standards can be improved, and that needs to be an ongoing issue. Another example which I would give you, especially in light of the fact that we are building thousands of homes in coming years, is what we need to do to change the resilience of buildings to things like increased storm events, bushfires and other things. So there's been a lot of work and commitment by governments around increasing the resilience of buildings, and that's done through changes to the NCC over time after there's been appropriate consultation and information given about how those changes need to be made to our technical standards. So they're just two examples of things that are ready now or that are coming forward through what we know about the resilience of buildings and standards in buildings. And this National Construction Code is an important document that needs to live and breathe and change as we get feedback from the system to make sure that our technical standards for buildings are appropriate.
So the Treasury leak suggests then that the government would like next week's economic reform roundtable to put forward a pause to these changes. Would you support that or not?
I don't think it's necessary to put a blanket stop on things. I do think that sometimes when we're doing reform and new regulations are coming in, they need to be assessed appropriately for their impact. But stopping changes to the NCC is not going to help us build buildings more quickly. We need to build safe buildings. We can't have new buildings at any cost. The outcomes for consumers in the community when buildings aren't built correctly, when our standards aren't up to date and aren't refreshed regularly, are significant. So we don't want to be taking away important changes that look to increase and improve our safety requirements in buildings and our resilience of buildings, only to find that we are building a legacy of problems for communities in the future.
So what are your thoughts then on how the Housing and Construction Centre can be improved, or industry can be improved to increase housing stock without compromising quality and safety?
So one of the big issues that industry raises is the lack of consistency across states and territories. So this is, I guess, a problem with our federal system, where we have lots of different requirements that builders and companies need to grapple with in terms of compliance issues. And industry is often calling for some consistency around things like licensing requirements, building product safety and standards. And these sorts of laws are left to individual states and territories to deal with, and they can be very confusing and different. I'd like to see the federal government actually stepping in a little bit more and working with the states to come up with more national laws that give consistency and help with those compliance costs to businesses in order to improve productivity through some of those ways. If we're looking at regulatory issues, I think they're things that industry have complained about for a long time.
Bronwyn Weir, thanks so much.
You're welcome.